Hello and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, on today's episode, what are we going to be riffing about?
Wharfedale E30 loudspeakers.
Because we're back in 1977, aren't we?
Yes, we sort of are all the time, really, aren't we?
It's so true. I was thinking actually the other day, we haven't had a game of Top Trumps in ages.
No.
We should dig out the...
Or maybe we should do one live.
We could do a Top Trumps riff, couldn't
yes.
we? I'm sure
you
I've got
always win, though.
Well, only because I really only had one deck, which was supercars, and I kind of memorised every single fact, and probably still know most of them, sadly.
Yeah.
But I'd love to do that. We should definitely have a game of Top Trumps.
Yes.
Pretend it is 77. So because this was our sort of seasons of playing chess and at school and all this stuff, wasn't it? So and Wharfedale were making some really cool speakers at the time.
How many chess games did we have?
Oh my God, hundreds.
So we held each other to a draw.
Yeah.
We'd done like about nearly 100 games, and we was like sort of 48 to 48 or something.
It was ridiculous. Yeah, it was mad, absolutely mad.
So
but
and
this
sad, I think, as well.
We were, but so. Also in the way we were really sad was we were probably the only two kids at school who were reading Hi-Fi magazines. And Wharfedales would have featured extremely highly.
They would
in all of our Hi-Fi magazines. In fact, it's really interesting. I probably shouldn't say this, but all the Wharfedales which I used to read about and want, you probably own now. You do have a collection of Wharfedale
I do
speakers.
like 70s Wharfedale speakers.
You definitely have a place in your heart for them. And in fact, without sort of using up all the time, what have you got? So in your kitchen, you've got a really interesting
I've got
pair.
E70s, which have been heavily modified
by Anna Peach.
But they're not that heavily modified, just basically better internal wiring and crossover components. And a bit of extra damping in the cabs.
It worries me how good they sound.
They
really do sound amazing. I mean, in some ways they sort of they do things, I'm not going to say better, but differently to your NS1000s.
Yes.
They've got a real listenability to them, haven't they? So
they can make the NS1000 sound like quite dry and unemotional.
They really can.
Which is bizarre, considering the NS1000s do that to almost every other speaker.
I know, it's amazing, amazing. And also, you don't even position them very well. They're not on stands. They just sort of sit on your kitchen floor and live there, and they sound
they're on
incredible.
little Sauberthane pads.
Yes, okay.
But
sure.
Yeah, but they're they are basically stuck by the back wall, so
the thing is,
it's not like I've taken them seriously.
Forgive me for saying this, but the Wharfedales now from that era look very dated, and I'm always astonished as to how good they sound despite their appearance and age. So it just goes to show, if you've got a good design, it sticks, doesn't it? So you've got those. Which other ones?
Well, I've got Wharfedale Dovedale SP2s, which we haven't featured and we can do. I've got Diamonds, which I think we've done, haven't we?
I love the Diamonds.
We've done the Chevins as well.
We did the Chevins. They were really cool, weren't they? They were really funky, weren't they?
But the E-series is kind of the most interesting series of that era of Wharfedale.
Yes.
And the weird thing is that it's kind of totally out of time, because in the 70s, all loudspeakers were moving away from paper coned drive units to all kinds of fancy things like the sort of fiberglass polyprop and all that kind of stuff.
Titanium domes.
Well, that was that was more the 80s.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, okay. But it was like Beckstream was another one, like the ones in your Lynn Sara's.
Yeah, the Kefs.
And Isobarics, absolutely, the Kef drivers.
Yeah.
So basically, you were moving away from paper drive units, which had been really popular in the 50s and 60s because they're light, and easy to drive, to these sort of fancier materials which broke up, had much better breakup characteristics, but they were heavier.
Yes.
So they're kind of basically variations on the theme of plastic type units.
Yes. So did that make them less efficient to drive?
Absolutely. So it's not the only thing that determines whether, the efficiency of a drive unit, but still it plays a big part, because you've got a magnet and it's kind of moving the thing forward and backward. and if it's twice as heavy, then you're gonna need more power.
Yes, to control it.
Yeah, and arguably it's going to be slower as well.
Of course.
So Wharfedale came along in 1977, just when the whole world was getting into Bextrine and polypropylene and very sort of plastic type stuff, and came out with basically its most expensive speaker with paper drive units.
Sort of drum roll.
Yeah,
quite.
Yeah. That was the E30 at the time.
Yeah.
And that had several paper cone drive units and a kind of horn-loaded tweeter. And that was the E70. E standard for efficiency, and the 70 standard for the 70-litre internal volume.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a lot of air, basically, to move around. And these things were reflex ported as well. And the E70 had its efficiency was something like 95 dB for 1 watt. And I played you in my kitchen. I played you, only last week, I think. I can't remember what we were playing. It was it was probably Simple Minds or something. And it was pretty much close to deafening. And I sort of pointed at the power meter, and it was
1 watt,
just over a watt.
Yes,
basically.
yes.
So that's a clever party trick, and if you've got a valve amp or a name Nate, or a Musical Fidelity A1, it's very good to have such an efficient speaker design.
Yes, yeah.
So we're talking today about the E30s, and they were kind of came later in the series, but Wharfedale started this efficiency series. And I remember the advert was a really cool advert. It used to say, plays music with remarkable ease. And the E, like an E and an N. It's very clever.
Excellent.
What's that? The glory days of British advertising.
Yes, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name.
Absolutely, yes. A miles a day helps you work, rest and play. So, yeah, all good.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
So I did a season comparing for Murray Walker, who's the nicest man in the world.
Yep.
And I asked him the question: Did he come up with that slogan? Because it's an urban myth.
Yeah.
Saying Murray Walker came up with the Mars slogan.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't, but he worked on the team who did it. He was so modest as well. He probably flipping did know Murray.
Yeah.
But no, that was brilliant. Top man. There we are. Anyway, sorry, digress.
Well, how the mighty fall, Mike. You were working with Murray Walker, and now you're working with your old school friend with who's drinking your Strongbow.
You are drinking my Strongbow, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, that's unlike you. But equally the nicest man in the world. Well. Equally. So there we are.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. But anyway, as I was so rudely interrupted.
Sorry.
So basically this was a weird range of speakers because it was absolutely focused on efficiency. And a big bang for your buck, as it were. They had paper drive units and horn-loaded tweeters, and they had a completely different sound to all of the kind of 70s things, like the Mission 770, the Spender BC1, all of those kind of great speakers of the day. They made them sound sort of dull and slow, basically. But at the same time, the Wharfedale's, the E range was pretty crude. It's kind of headbanger kind of sound.
Yes. Yeah. Do you know? But I totally get it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a massive 70s speaker fan, because I think there were too many 70s speaker manufacturers out there trying to be a bit too clever for their boots.
Yeah.
And actually, it's quite interesting. Probably someone in Wharfedale just went, no, hang on, guys, let's go back to basics here.
Yeah.
These speaker types are just not cutting the mustard.
Yeah.
Let's not reinvent the wheel and do something which we know we can engineer and make it work really well.
Well, the weird thing about the E series, absolutely, is that it, in engineering terms, it was very old-fashioned. So the light drive units, the way the cabinet was done, and basically the very high sensitivity, which is all things you would have in 60s and 50s speakers, because you had to back then, because everything was such low power. So it's very kind of, in some ways, quite backward design, but deliberately so. and yet the appearance of them was like so 1978. It was so Saturday Night Fever.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So the kind of chrome trim rings, you know, or the brushed aluminium trim rings.
Just like off a Ford Gear,
yes,
you know, something like that. Yeah.
And the fishnet grills, which are like the Ford Capris had fishnet. You know, can you remember the fishnet headrests?
Yes, I vaguely can actually. Yeah.
So on the kind of S models. You know,
yes.
So you kind of, to me, it sort of connotes Bodie and Doyle running, you know, chasing a terrorist in a gold 3-litre S. You know? So it was,
they do look very dated now. The Wharfedales I'm talking about, I still love a Capri, of course, but no, the Wharfedales look very dated now, don't they? So by modern standards,
and of course the Capri is absolutely bang up to date in its styling, isn't it?
Well, so, you know, it's amazing. It is a bit what goes around comes around, though, because I like the sort of modern coupes of the day, and I think, you know, there's some great ones around. So, but you know, you don't really see sort of speakers with things like you know, adjustable treble control on them anymore, and things like that. So. In fact, your NS1000s have got little dials on them, haven't they, to do various
mid-range and high level pads. Yeah, I mean that was quite common. There were a lot of speakers in the 70s that had that.
Yeah, you don't have. I can't think of any 80 speakers that had them. I'm sure there are, but I can't think of
very few, because that was seen as incredibly 70s. So, you know, and of course when you had CD, you had a kind of much more uniform source as well. It was, you know, it had in theory at least had a flat. It was flat, wasn't it?
Yes,
pretty much. Whereas in the 70s you had wildly differing, you know, kind of cartridges and things like that.
Yeah,
and so on.
True.
So yeah, they you know, that was definitely a feature of those kind of that era of speakers.
I'd never really considered that. You're absolutely right, aren't you? Because you know, if you were playing an 8-track or a cassette or a reel-to-reel against a turntable, then they're all going to sound really different sources, weren't they? Have very different tonal characteristics. So,
and you also had to remember that speakers were often shoved behind sofas and stuff.
Well,
like that in the 70s, you know?
Absolutely.
So yes, it was like the Wild West basically. There wasn't, you didn't get like, you know, it was much more unusual to have them on stands neatly placed in exactly the right place.
So is that you sort of having a little nod to the 70s by putting your Wharfedales pretty much under your kitchen table?
Yes.
And they still sound annoyingly good. It just flies in the face of everything we've ever been taught. Wow. It's just brilliant.
But the E30s came a little bit later than the 70s, a couple of years later, and they've basically got two. I was going to bring one along, but the thing weighs, you know, like 15 kilograms, and it's like that big. So it just wouldn't really fit in our studio.
I'm sure we can take some nice pictures.
Yes, I'll definitely do that. But yeah, so the E30 is a downscaled E70, but it's still very big by modern standards.
Yes.
And the reason we're focusing on the E30 for our retro riff is that it's much more easily accessible. It's easier to come by than the E70s.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually a surprisingly large amount of E70s, E50s, E30s, E20s around still, and a few E90s. But the kind of pick of the range, if you want cheap thrills in 70s speaker terms, is the E30.
And look, they're not the most accurate, you know, transducers in the whole wide world, are they? And but they do something really beautiful. They've got a really beguiling sound, and they're like sort of miniature E70s, aren't they?
Yes.
They've got that lovely tonal characteristic, and they're such fun to listen to.
I mean, it's a lovely tonal characteristic, but it's not an accurate one.
No, I know. No,
it's
I
kind
totally
of feisty and up there, and it sort of snaps. But it's the thing about all of the E series, especially E30 upwards, is that it's so fast. It's so fast, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just like whack. You know, transients just. It's like they almost happened before they started.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in the time domain, they're beautifully. It's superb in the time domain, and it just makes music sound alive. And sort of vibrant and like, you know, it's like, wow, it's kind of got that wow factor. It's the core blimey, you know. It's like the 3-litre Capri compared to the 1.3 kind of thing.
100%. And do you know what? We talk about this quite a lot on Riff, trying to get into hi-fi and get a budget system.
Yeah.
Actually, we reviewed a couple of amps recently, haven't we? Which were sort of tiny little things. We reviewed the the shit amp.
Quite,
and we won't go down that route again.
Yep. It wasn't though, was it?
And no, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And the Edwards Audio
Yep.
amp as well, that lovely little thing.
Yeah.
And neither of those were expensive
Nope.
at all, and we really like those.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the biggest issue with both is going to be their power output.
Yeah.
But if you had a pair of E30s,
Yeah.
they'd drive those no problem
Easy,
at all, wouldn't
really
they?
loud.
So then all you need is a half decent source.
Yeah.
A chord mojo with your phone.
Yeah.
And you could have,
Yeah.
for not a lot of money,
Yeah.
a really amazingly good hi-fi system, which
Yeah.
I think would give a massive amount of pleasure.
Absolutely.
Because it would be fun and you know and kicking, and as you say, core blimey.
Well, absolutely. When you've got a speaker with a 95 dB for 1 watt efficiency, you can have a 2 watt amplifier.
You can. Yes.
Especially in a smaller space. So they basically unlock all kinds of weird and wonderful amps, especially valve amps. And those smaller Wharfedale E's sound, well, all the Wharfedale E's sound lovely with valve amps.
See, our old friend here, Peter Farrow from English Acoustics, would love this, wouldn't he? Because you could buy an old sort of leak valve amp or a quad valve amp from a million years ago, and pair them with these and actually get a really lovely sound, couldn't you? And it would drive them, without any problem at all. And I think that would be right up sort of Peter's alley. So, that's definitely something we should put a system together like that.
Yeah,
I think that would be really cool. In fact, we probably should have dug your thinking about it. We should have dug your E30s out when we did a review of the shit.
Yeah,
because it would have worked. Yes, because it would have worked brilliantly with those.
Yeah,
I would say that I still think to squeeze the most out of them, you do want a pair of stands. They'd probably fit nice on a pair of, say, Linsara stands.
Absolutely.
You need some decent cable. Minimum of sort of QED.
Yeah,
sort of 79 strand or equivalent or whatever it is.
Well, the great thing about them is that they respond very well to tweaks. So my E70s, when I put better capacitors in the crossover and better wiring, I used Russ Andrews Kimber cable and some better damping pads and so on inside, again from Russ Andrews, they sounded dramatically better. So I think the E series the expensive ones were very expensive, but they're still built down to a price.
Yes,
and you can actually make up for that, by tweaking a few bits.
Yes, and
the E30s respond to tweaking just as well as the others do. So you could buy a pair of E30s, a good pair, cosmetically, for 250 quid, and then just improve the damping, rewire them a little bit. Maybe if you're feeling adventurous, upgrade the crossover, which there isn't much of it anyway.
No, very simple.
And maybe put sort of new type binding posts on the back.
Yes.
But then you have a really nice speaker that will just do an awful lot. And if you like rock, disco, kind of sort of punk, techno, electronic, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's as the kids say, it's banging.
Sure.
It's absolutely banging. And classical, maybe not.
No.
And it would certainly make Beethoven's Fifth Symphony sound fun, but it'll be a little bit screechy. But there we go.
Yes, with Nigel and his Stradivarius.
Yes.
Yeah, quite.
Absolutely.
But great fun, great speakers, and I think a top Hi-Fi Riff tip there for a budget system, without a doubt.
There's a lot of E30s still around. They come up on eBay every week. Just try and get the best ones you can. Try and get ones with the drive units intact that haven't been repaired. The roll surrounds repaired by some bodger type person.
Yeah.
Get one with good drive units and one that's obviously been stored well, hasn't been left outside in the shed for 30 years.
No, absolutely. So let's do a retro riffometer on the E30s. What out of 10? What are you going to give them?
Well, I'm going to give them 8.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're not not the greatest speaker in the world, but they're really good fun.
Yeah.
And for specific applications, fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm going to give them a 9 because I think for 250 quid, you've got a backbone of a hi-fi system.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to spend. Can't remember off the top of my head how much either the Edwards or the shit were, but they weren't a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So for 500 quid, you've got an amp and speakers.
Yeah.
And then you already own a phone. You just need a DAC.
Yeah.
Even one of the iFi DACs, which we reviewed,
Yeah.
which were really good for 100 and something quid.
Yeah.
Brilliant. In fact, we've got a DAC coming, haven't we? We've got the the Wim DAC coming
Pro,
soon.
yeah.
Wim Pro.
Yeah.
So we'll review that.
Yeah.
We could put that in that system, couldn't we, and see how that sounds.
But the main thing is find another pair of speakers with 95 dB sensitivity. For that little money.
Exactly.
That's
Hi-Fi Riff challenge. For
yes,
the day.
That's the message. That's the takeaway message.
Absolutely.
So,
and on that note,
yeah.
Thank you very much indeed for watching another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.